Disclaimer. The testimonies featured on this channel are presented as received, reflecting the personal experiences and perspectives of the individuals who have generously shared them with us. While we do not verify or authenticate the events described, we encourage our viewers to approach these testimonies with compassion and understanding, as they represent the personal journeys of those involved. Thank you for your understanding and patience. Today's experience was shared with us by a brother from Syria. What he is about to share is a story you won't want to miss. Please watch until the end to fully understand his experience. Trust me, this is a story you don't want to miss. My name is Khalid Hassan, and I'm 42 years old. I was born in the ancient city of Aleppo, Syria. My childhood was spent amidst the narrow, bustling streets of the old city, surrounded by the call to prayer echoing from the minarets. For as long as I can remember, Islam has been the center of my life. I was the eldest son in a devout Muslim family. My father, a scholar of the Quran, instilled in me a deep reverence for the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. At an early age, I memorized the Quran and developed a passion for studying the Hadith. By the time I was 20, I was leading prayers in my local mosque, something that brought my family immense pride. But life in Syria was not easy. Over the years, the growing unrest and war turned our once peaceful home into a place of fear and chaos. In 2016, after losing many loved ones to the violence, I made the difficult decision to leave. With my wife and 2 young children, I fled to the United Kingdom, hoping to find safety and rebuild our lives. Settling in Birmingham was a challenge. Everything was new: the language, the culture, even the cold weather. Yet my faith gave me strength. I became the Imam of a small mosque, guiding fellow immigrants like me who had also been uprooted from their homeland. My days were filled with teaching, leading prayers, and offering counsel to those struggling with their new reality. To everyone who knew me, I was a pillar of faith and certainty. I taught that Islam was the true path to salvation, and I believed it with all my heart. But little did I know that my convictions were about to be tested in ways I could never imagine. It was a cold, rainy evening in Birmingham. I had just finished leading the evening prayer at the mosque and was on my way home. The roads were slick with rain, and visibility was poor. My mind was preoccupied with the sermon I had planned for Friday, reflecting on how I could inspire the congregation to deepen their faith. As I turned onto a busy street, a car came speeding from the opposite direction. Before I could react, the vehicle skidded, lost control, and collided with mine head-on. The sound of the crash was deafening. My body was thrown forward violently, and everything went black. When I regained a faint sense of awareness, I could hear muffled voices and feel a sharp pain radiating through my body. Paramedics were working frantically to get me out of the wreckage. I heard someone say, "He's critical. We need to get him to the hospital immediately." In the ambulance, I drifted in and out of consciousness. I could feel my life slipping away, but I clung to the words of the Shahada, repeating them in my heart. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. By the time we reached the hospital, I was barely holding on. The doctors rushed me into the ICU, and my family was informed that my chances of survival were slim. I had multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a severe head injury. Machines beeped around me, and tubes were inserted to help me breathe. As the days passed, my condition remained critical. The doctors told my wife that all they could do was wait and pray. My body lay lifeless on the hospital bed, but something extraordinary was happening within me, something I could never have imagined. One night, as my family prayed fervently by my bedside, I felt my spirit detach from my body. It was as though I was floating above the room, looking down at myself, lifeless and pale, surrounded by machines. I could see the anguish on my wife's face and the tears streaming down my children's cheeks. I wanted to reach out to them, to tell them I was still there, but I couldn't. A strange force was pulling me away, drawing me into a tunnel of darkness. Fear gripped me as I realized I was heading into the unknown. That was the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. As I moved through the tunnel, an overwhelming darkness surrounded me. The air felt heavy, and I could hear faint whispers that grew louder with each passing moment. These voices were not comforting. They were filled with sorrow, pain, and despair. My heart pounded, and I tried to cry out, but no sound came from my mouth. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a vast, desolate landscape. The ground was scorched, and the air reeked of burning sulfur. Shadows moved in the distance, and I could hear screams that chilled me to my core. I realized I was no longer in the world I knew. My Islamic faith had taught me about life after death, paradise for the righteous and hell for the sinners. But what I was seeing now was beyond anything I had ever imagined. As I stood there, trembling, I noticed figures approaching me. At first they were unrecognizable, but as they drew closer, I recognized their faces. They were men I had revered my entire life, great Islamic scholars and leaders, men whose teachings had shaped my faith. They looked tormented, their faces twisted in agony. One of them stepped forward and spoke, his voice trembling. "Khalid," he said, "you must listen carefully. We are here to warn you." I was shocked. "Warn me? About what? Why are you here in this place of torment? You were men of great faith." The scholar lowered his head in shame. "We were wrong," he said. "We followed teachings that blinded us to the truth. We thought our deeds and rituals would save us, but we were mistaken. There is only one way to salvation, and it is not what we preached." Before I could ask what he meant, another figure appeared. This time, I felt a deep sense of awe and fear. It was Prophet Muhammad. His presence was unlike anything I had ever experienced, majestic yet sorrowful. He looked at me with piercing eyes and spoke with a voice that carried both authority and sadness. "Khalid," he said, "you have been chosen to deliver a message. What you see here is the fate of those who reject the truth." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by his words. "But what truth?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I have always followed your teachings. I have devoted my life to Islam." Muhammad's expression softened, and he said something that shook me to my core. "Khalid, the truth is not in the rituals or the laws. The truth is in Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him." My mind reeled. How could this be? I had always been taught that Jesus was a prophet, nothing more. But now, standing here in this place of torment, I was hearing something completely different from the one I had revered most in my faith. "You must return," Muhammad continued. "Tell those who are still living that they must seek Jesus. He is the only way to salvation. Do not delay, for time is short." As he spoke, the ground beneath me began to shake, and the darkness grew deeper. I felt myself being pulled away, back into the tunnel. The voices of the scholars and Muhammad echoed in my ears, urging me to remember the message and share it with the world. Before I knew it, I was back in my hospital room, hovering above my body. I could see the machines beeping steadily, and my wife praying by my side. A bright light surrounded me, and I felt a sudden jolt. I gasped for air as my spirit re-entered my body. My eyes fluttered open, and I could hear the gasps and cries of my family. The doctors rushed in, astonished that I had come back to life. Little did they know I had returned with a message that would change everything. As I lay in my hospital bed, blinking up at the bright fluorescent lights above me, my mind was still reeling from everything I had experienced. My body was weak, But my spirit felt different, lighter but also heavier, burdened with a truth I couldn't shake. I could still see it, the desolation, the torment, the faces of those I loved now lost. And then the words, Jesus, the only way. How could this be? All my life, I had devoted myself to Islam. My family, my community, they had always taught me that the path to God was through obedience, through prayer, fasting, and good deeds. And yet, in that place of darkness, I was shown something far beyond anything I had ever known. The message of Jesus, salvation through him alone. The days in the hospital blurred together. As I wrestled with my thoughts, I would close my eyes and see the faces, scholars who had once guided me, now condemned to eternal suffering because they had not accepted this truth. I could still hear Muhammad's voice, soft yet clear, speaking of Jesus with such certainty. His words weren't the ones I'd been raised on. They were different, urgent, painful, life-changing. I felt a tug at my heart that wouldn't go away. My family, my wife, my children, how could I tell them? What would they think? I knew they believed as I once did. They had been raised in the same tradition, taught to revere the teachings of Islam, to live according to its laws. How could I ask them to turn away from what they had always known? But the weight of the vision, of the truth, was too heavy to ignore. The message had been given to me for a reason. I couldn't keep it to myself. I had to share it. I spent my first few days at home reflecting deeply, reading the Quran and revisiting its verses, searching for clarity, for any confirmation that what I had seen could align with what I had always believed. But instead of finding peace, I only found confusion. The more I searched, the more it seemed like something was missing, something fundamental. The Quran spoke of the coming of a prophet, a messenger from God, but it didn't mention Jesus in the same way I had encountered him. There was no clear confirmation of his divinity, no promise of salvation through him alone. I couldn't reconcile it. One evening, after yet another long night of reading, I sank to my knees in desperation. God, guide me. Show me the truth, I cried. Is it in what I've known my whole life, or have I been wrong all along? It was then, in that quiet moment, that I heard a still small voice speak to me. It wasn't audible, but it resonated deep within me, a voice that felt filled with love and peace. The voice echoed, "Seek Jesus." Tears streamed down my face. Could it really be this simple? Could salvation truly be found in Jesus? But doubt lingered. Could this really be the way? Was I being misled? Was this a test? The next few weeks were agonizing. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, what I had been told. I spent countless hours in prayer, in reading, searching, seeking answers. Slowly, the truth began to emerge. The more I read about Jesus, the stories of his life, his teachings, his miracles, the more I felt certain. This wasn't just a prophet. Jesus was more than that. He was the Son of God, the Messiah, the Savior. And then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, as I sat alone in my room reading the Bible someone had given me during my hospital stay, I came across John 14:6. It reads, Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." It felt as though the verse was speaking directly to me. I trembled as the realization hit me. This was the answer. This was the truth I had been searching for. Jesus was the only way. No amount of good deeds, no endless prayers could bring me to God. It was only through him, through Jesus, that I could be saved. A peace washed over me. But alongside that peace came a profound responsibility. I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to share this with others. My heart burned with the desire to tell others, Muslims, my fellow brothers and sisters, about the truth I had discovered. How could I not? They were living in darkness, just as I had been, and so with my body still weak but my spirit renewed, I began to share my story. First with my family, my wife, my children. It wasn't easy. Their eyes widened in shock, fear clouding their faces. They had known me as a devoted man of Islam, and here I was now telling them that everything they believed might be wrong. "Khalid," my wife whispered, tears in her eyes, "have you lost your mind? This isn't the truth. Islam is the only way." I gently took her hands and looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of my message but also the urgency. "No, Habiba, it's not what I want to believe. It's what I've seen. Jesus, he is the truth. He is the only way to God." For days there was tension in our home. My wife would pray silently, her tears falling during her salah. My children, too young to fully understand, would ask questions that broke my heart. "Why, Abba? Why are you changing?" And then came the moment that I had dreaded, the day I had to go beyond my home, to the people outside our household, the community I had once been a part of, the mosque I had prayed in every Friday, the friends who had once seen me as a leader. Now I had to stand before them and tell them the truth I had discovered. It was a small gathering, just a few men from the mosque, close friends. I spoke slowly, carefully, sharing my experience in the hospital, the vision I had seen, the message given to me by Muhammad himself, that Jesus is the only way to salvation. At first, there was silence. Stunned faces looked at me, murmurs spreading through the group. Then someone spoke up, his voice filled with anger. "You've gone mad, Khalid. How could you turn your back on Islam after everything you've learned?" I met his gaze and felt a surge of courage. I haven't turned my back on Islam. I've found the truth. Islam led me to this moment, to Jesus. The room erupted in debate. Voices rose, tempers flared. Some called me a traitor, others confused, desperate to understand. But amidst the turmoil, I knew that I couldn't back down. This was my mission, my calling. From that day onward, I became an evangelist in my own community. I spent nights in prayer, reading the scriptures, learning more about Jesus, and days speaking to anyone who would listen. My message was simple. Jesus is the truth. Salvation can only be found in him. The road ahead was not easy. I lost friends, faced hostility, and had my faith questioned repeatedly. But through it all, I knew I was walking the path God had set before me. And with each soul that began to listen, I felt my mission grow stronger, knowing that I was part of something far greater than myself. Jesus had saved me, and now I was called to bring that same message of hope to others. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, yet my journey felt as though it had only just begun. Each morning, I awoke with a renewed determination to share the message I had been entrusted with, to tell others about Jesus and the salvation I had found in him. But along with that determination came a new reality. I was no longer merely an imam. Now, I was a witness, a messenger, and often a target. The opposition began subtly at first. Whispers in the mosque, angry glances during prayer, and those who once revered me now spoke of me with disdain. "He has lost his way," they would say. "He is no longer a true follower of Islam." At first, I tried to reach out, to speak calmly and explain what I had experienced, hoping they might understand. I reasoned, I pleaded, "Look at the scriptures. Don't you see the truth? Jesus came to bring salvation, not just law. He is the way, the truth, and the life." But my words only seemed to deepen their anger. They argued that I had been misled, that I had allowed doubt to creep into my faith. "You have been deceived by the Christian scriptures," one elder told me sternly. "You've forgotten what Islam truly teaches. Muhammad is the final prophet, the one who came to guide us to God." I could see the fear in their eyes, the fear of losing control over what they believed. I was shaking the foundations of everything they had once known. It wasn't just within the mosque. I found that in the wider community, the hostility grew. I would speak to people on the streets, in marketplaces, in homes, and the reaction was often the same. "Why are you telling us this?" they would ask. "Are you trying to lead us astray?" Some would listen, curious, but many would shut me down immediately. "Stay away from our faith. You've lost your way, Khalid. Don't bring your new beliefs here." One evening, as I walked home after sharing the gospel with a small group of curious neighbors, I was approached by two men. Their faces were unfamiliar, but their eyes were sharp, filled with suspicion. "Who are you?" one of them demanded, blocking my path. "I am Khalid," I replied, "a servant of God sharing his truth." They exchanged glances, and I could feel their hostility. "You're preaching falsehoods. You've betrayed your people, your faith." I tried to speak calmly. "I'm only speaking what I've seen and heard, what has been revealed to me. There is no other way to salvation but through Jesus." Their anger flared. Before I could react, one of them grabbed my arm roughly, and they pushed me against a nearby wall. "You dare to speak of Jesus in our land? In the name of Islam, you must be silenced." Fear crept into my heart, but I held my ground. "You can try to silence me, but the truth will not be silenced." For a moment I thought they would strike me, but instead they stepped back, and one of them sneered, "We'll see if your so-called truth will protect you in the end." That night, as I lay awake in bed, their words echoed in my mind. The fear was real. I had never faced this kind of opposition before. My faith had always been unshaken in the confines of my community. There, I was respected. But now I was seen as a traitor, someone who had strayed too far from what they believed to be the one true path. Yet even in the face of this opposition, something deep within me told me I was walking the right path. I remembered the peace I had felt when I first embraced Jesus, the certainty in my heart that this was the way. And I knew that nothing, no threats, no opposition could change that truth. The months that followed were filled with more encounters like this, times where I had to stand firm in the face of hostility, times when my faith was tested. There were moments of discouragement, nights I spent wondering if I was doing the right thing. Were I too rash in sharing this truth? Were my actions putting myself and my family in danger?